All right. So, nationally, you're a rare thing. You're an educator who's been in the field for decades now.
Yes.
So, was there a moment, like when did you know you wanted to be a teacher?
It happened it didn't happen immediately, despite the fact being in a household led by a mother who is an educator, career educator. It the first inkling that I wanted to do something other than what I was in college for, which was initially thinking to be a lawyer around social justice issues, was being shot on a field at a high school football field in Philadelphia. And I didn't connect that to a classroom, but what I originally connected that to is how do I work with youth who are have anger, have access to guns, did not finish high school, and what I originally did was go to a youth study center, which is basically a kiddie jail for children waiting to be adjudicated. And I didn't even last through orientation because it was just depressing for me to see 12-year-olds locked up, having to do suicide watches and things. And so right when I was trying to figure out what was I going to actually do next, someone called about Philadelphia and concerned black men trying to recruit black males to teach and lead classrooms. And that resonated with me.
Right.
Not initially, but it did.
So you had this lifelong interest in social justice, but
Yes,
you didn't necessarily see that connecting to teaching.
Yeah. I didn't make the connection. I think I knew I wanted to, both my parents were in the Black Panther Party. That's where they met in West Philadelphia. And so we had this whole ecosystem between our home. The school that we attended was a freedom school, so it was really, and social justice issues was embedded in it. And then the community of friends that we were just engaged in. I knew I wanted to be around social justice issues, championing people and youth and communities. But I didn't make the direct connection between teaching and social justice. That was something that I would later on figure out.
Yeah. So you go to college. I guess you do some sort of like pre-law thing.
Right.
And then you go back to Philadelphia.
Yes.
Yeah, so what were the barriers? So you didn't have a traditional education background. Like, how'd you get into the classroom?
Yeah, so fortunately, Concerned Black Men helped us. I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP, and I graduated in '92. And one thing I noticed, and I had a roommate who was actually an education major, and so I was just like, wow, it's pretty intense. You have to practice, and you have to go to student teaching, and he was always writing lesson plans, but it still never made the connection. My mother carrying her tote bag full of papers definitely didn't make the connection. I was just like, wow, that's a lot, Mom, and it was really, I was able to enroll in HBCU Cheney, Cheney University, and from there started taking courses and practicing. And what I did was I signed up to be a substitute teacher as well, because I've never actually been in a school since I graduated from Overbrook. So let me just see if I like it. And I was assigned a kindergarten class and a first grade class the first couple weeks, and I came home and said, Mom, never mind, I'm not doing this at all. God bless kindergarten teachers, like they are amazing, talented and patient. And that just was not the right fit. And she said, well, one, you're a substitute, and she's like, this is what I do, but I feel comfortable doing it. She said, you will probably feel at home in your own classroom. And she said, you'll probably be much better with older students. And she was absolutely right. I was assigned middle school and fell in love with it.
Okay, nice. So, why do you think there's so few young black men going into teaching?
There's so many reasons. I think one, the young men that I speak to, because we really didn't want to make too many assumptions. We knew what we thought and what our experiences were, but that was also a long time ago. And the youth that we speak to, some of them speak of just the bad experiences that they have, and they just can't picture themselves in classrooms and in schools where they have so many bad memories and so many examples of oppressive situations. And one of the challenges that we give them that seems to resonate with a lot of them is be the teacher you wish you had. and students that we have our organization does something called a Why I Teach tour, where we visit high schools and just have conversations with these youth about the joys of teaching, because everyone hears the negative aspects of it. Everyone hears certain things, and we also want to provide context, and we also want to challenge them that that you're a part of the solution. And social justice resonates with a lot of the youth that we talk to, as well as the idea of leadership. So we say teaching isn't just teaching a content, it's actually leading a classroom. And when we break down the numbers, like over 10 years, if you teach 100 kids per year, that is a major impact positively that you can have in the communities. And students haven't always necessarily looked at it from that angle. So you have one, the experience, two, people not talking to you. The 17 people who started the Fellowship Black Male Educators for Social Justice, not a single one of us was ever approached as a child to say, hey, you know what, I saw how you were mentoring your classmate. I saw how you helped so-and-so with their math homework. Have you ever thought about being a teacher? 17 people, not one of us were encouraged to teach as youth. We all were approached after we graduated from college. So one of our first kind of studies that we did, we said, let's talk to our white colleagues and ask them, hey, when did you first hear about teaching or tapped on the shoulder for that? The white women, our friends and colleagues who we spoke to, they said they remember as early as elementary school being told, you'll be a great teacher. So here we have two messages, right? The black boy next to them, maybe they were handed a basketball or something. The white girl next to them, they were told, you know what, we trust you with our future. We trust you to be in front of a classroom. But the black boys' experiences, a lot of them mirror ours. We weren't approached.
Yep. So, I mean, recruitment's only not even half the battle, right? Because there are all of these studies about retention rates among teachers of color. It's significantly lower than among white teachers. So yeah, tell me about your first teaching gig. How'd you get through it?
Yeah, you know what? My first teaching gig was amazing. And it just really reinforced to me now, looking back in retrospect, like the stability and support that schools need to have and leadership teams need to have in order to welcome new teachers. And I think about how many new teachers are not welcomed or not supported and are thrust in. And you hear the saying in schools, which you should never hear, like, oh yeah, throw you into the fire and throw you into the ocean, and all this thing about dying or swimming or dying or surviving the fire or not. And I'm like, this is school, like working with kids, like this should not be the paradigm that we operate in. But unfortunately, that's what you hear, in this work. And so when I think about what I'm trying to replicate as a principal as well as a advocate, is I entered Turner Middle School in Southwest Philadelphia. We probably had 60 plus teachers there, almost 1,000 students. There were 2 brand new teachers in the entire building. And so when I look at other schools where, you might have any number of brand new teachers and the instability and the churn. So that was one, and just the stability and then having the capacity to welcome and support us. Not only was I placed in between 2 veteran teacher leaders who every transition, we're in a hallway and I'm just absorbing tidbits, right? And I'm seeing them, having the ability to being encouraged to visit other teachers' classrooms. But I was also assigned a formal mentor within the school and a formal coach by the school district from outside of the school. And so when I look at this whole ecosystem of support that I received as a brand new teacher, it's unfortunate and it's almost maybe even criminal how other teachers aren't, because at the end of the day, we are supporting students, and so that support that I receive or does not receive, that we do not receive, will impact directly students, and so that is, I think, paramount for retention.
So you had the 2 veteran teachers, and you had a mentor, right?
And a coach.
And a coach. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was
spoiled.
the early 90s.
Early 90s. Yep. 93. I started at John P. Turner Middle School.
Okay. Yep. But you had a connection to, right?
I did. It turns out that the school, everything for a reason, and the school that I was placed, John P. Turner, later I found out that the young man who shot me, that was the school that he dropped out. He did not finish the 8th grade, and what grade do I start teaching? 8th grade. Look at this call and response.
Oh,
This is
yeah.
good, very good, very good. I'm in good company. Yeah, eighth grade. And so at that point, because even then I was still thinking like, okay, I'll do this, and then I'll become, go back to lawyer, because that's really, the legal work is really what's going to address the inequities. Then I realized that, you know what, this is the work. This is where I need to be.
Yeah. So how early are you working with? How young are these students that you're working with through the fellowship?
Yeah, most of them are high school.
Okay.
We have a couple middle school students who very early on know that, hey, I'm thinking about being a teacher. But we haven't approached the work. So we work with a group called Educators Rising, who mentors and supports students in high school. And we're not doing it directly like, hey, join our group if you want to be a teacher. We say join our group if you're interested in social justice. We have a group of students at my school in particular. They call themselves Raised Woke. And I know that most of them are going to become teachers. Their level of consciousness, their level of wanting to do right and tip the scales of justice back in favor of youth and communities leads to classrooms, leads to schools. And there's Dr. Tolson, Ivory Tolson did some research around black men in HBCUs, and education was the #1 job choice, career choice at that particular, in HBCUs. So there's a strong interest, especially if people can make the connection of building relationships, content expertise, and a social justice lens.
Yeah.
That's the makings of a great teacher.
Yeah. So you're a principal now at Mastery Charter?
Mastery School-Shoemaker Campus.
Yep, that's West Philadelphia?
West Philadelphia, born and raised. Y'all know the rest, right?
I think I heard of that one.
So this is my 10th year there, my 25th in education, and I came there, because I actually went to summer school there one year. My high school, Overbrook High School, where Will Smith also attended, was right up the street. But Shoemaker used to feed into Overbrook High School, and I went there for a couple of reasons. One, it was in the neighborhood that I grew up in. My mom still lives there. And two, I remember when I had to go to summer school that summer as a 15-year-old. The first thing that I thought about when I was assigned summer school by a brand new teacher, who at first I said, like, what are you doing? Now he held the bar, even though he was a brand new teacher, and he said, no, you earned it. Because of course I was like, why'd you give me? He's like, no, you earned summer school. But the first thing I thought about as a 15-year-old was, how many times am I going to have to fight in that school during the summer? Which to me says a lot about, that's, at that time I didn't think of it, but now, like, that's traumatic and oppressive for a 15-year-old to constantly think about survival in a school. But that was what we knew in the community about this institution. And so to be able to go there as the principal and help try to make it a vastly different experience for my students and our community was just too good of an opportunity to pass up.
So tell me about the demographics of your teaching staff. Have you been able to recruit and retain those black male teachers?
It's been hard.
Yeah.
It's been hard. When I look at even the pipeline, it is not overflowing with black males. That's why I think long term, talking to high school students very early on, changing the experiences that they're having. We talked this idea of windows and mirrors. So many white students constantly have mirrors in front of them in the classroom. Who leads the classroom, the materials that's placed in front of them, whatever adorns the wall are constant mirrors of whiteness, and make them feel like, you know what, you are special, you are valued. Black students don't get that mirror. They typically get windows, and other students of color, they're constantly seeing the world through a white lens and white paradigms. And so what we need is, not only do black students need more mirrors, but white students also need more windows, and so that there's more equity in the educational space. And so while we have also majority white staff, what we want to do is also make sure that the cultural context and this awareness of windows and mirrors happening at the same time that we're trying to make sure that we're strongly recruiting and retaining our black male teachers. We have 4 right now who are leading classroom, Mr. Epps, Mr. Dessis, Mr. Wynn, and Mr. Morris. Mr. Dessis, for example, so many of his students right now say, you know, I want to be a teacher. He teaches 8th grade, but he teaches 8th grade social justice. We scrapped the history curriculum, we created social justice curriculum, well, he did. And through this lens where they look at youth-led social justice movements in the United States and South Africa, all youth-led, and they're making a connection between wow. And so I read our teachers, students take surveys to talk about their experiences and teacher perceptions surveys. And so many quotes are like, I'm going to be Mr. Dessis. I'm going to be a teacher. And so that just shows the power of representation in not only schools and classrooms, but in society.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm going to open up to questions in a second, but I guess like let's end on a policy note. Like, what should states and districts be doing to diversify the teaching force?
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing more conversation across the country and in states and talking about policy and the levers that can be used. And I think there are some shining areas that we can replicate. So one, calling it out. You know, I think sometimes states and districts are wary to actually set a public goal and say, like, this is what we're doing. Like, this is what we want to address. And so we know nationally 2% of classroom teachers are black men. We know Philadelphia is about 4%. But there are some charter networks that are at almost 8%, mastery charter schools included. And one of the things that they did was call it out and say, this is a goal, rallying around universities and things to help support that. Asking a state can ask universities, state-assisted schools or state schools, like, where are you with these numbers? How are you supporting the black students who are in your teacher colleges? How are you supporting high school students even beforehand? Like, what can happen? What are the barriers? And really take a deeper analysis of what are barriers that exist and how are we addressing them? There can be financial incentives. So many of my students who are even thinking about teaching, they don't realize in high school how expensive it is to become certified. And so what kind of incentive? They're first-generation college goers, and so this is a whole new bill that their families have not encountered before if they're first generation. So what are the incentives that can happen to support that? What are ways that, you know, we've even talked in the past, I know there are states that applied to the Department of Labor to renovate houses and give low subsidies for housing. Philadelphia gives tax abatements for a whole lot of, you know, wealthy white people. How about you tax abatements for young black men who want to lead our classrooms? We know the studies that if a black, and John Hopkins did a study, black boys, particularly those in poverty, 40% less likely to drop out if they have a single black teacher in grades 3 through 5. That seems like a very easy thing to wrap some policy around and address it if we're serious. But too often we, you know, we say we're serious about things, but more reluctant to do it. Only 6 states actually put teacher diversity in their ESSA plans. I'm grateful that Pennsylvania was one, and we are partnering with Pennsylvania Department of Education to continue this work, but 6 states said this is important enough to put in our ESSA plans.
Yeah. Okay.
And much more, but
right. So yeah, I hope I gave enough notice for questions from the audience. Do we have any? There we go.
Thank you so much for this panel and for your work, Sharif. My
Thank
name
you.
is Mukta Korpade, and I'm from Urban Alliance. We work with 17, 18-year-olds and help to kind of develop their future professional aspirations and goals. And something that I definitely try to emphasize with my kids is, you know, this context of you all have to be activists as you go out into this world. But something that you said really resonated with me, and for a lot of these kids, getting through high school is very much just one thing on paper that they need to check off to get away. And so I would like to hear from you, how do you frame teaching and maybe staying in your own community as a social justice issue? And kind of a follow-up to my own question is, I struggle with kind of convincing kids to try to stay where they are, because I think, you know, for so many of them, that's a painful experience and a painful pathway. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we, when I first started teaching, I heard that a lot of get your education so you can leave. And for someone who still educates in the neighborhood they grew up in, that was always really painful and shocking. And it took me a while before I started addressing it. Like, I don't hear that in my school as a principal, but as a teacher, I heard it frequently. And so I think one of the things that we talk about that's in our mission at Master Charter Shoemaker is that we help students lead and serve in their communities. If students end up in Idaho, we want them to be able to lead and serve. If they choose to come back to their community, then we want them to lead and serve. And so we don't spend a lot of time encouraging them to leave, but we do talk about, like, hey, part of the 8th grade social justice, they canvass, each student has to canvass and interview 25 people about what issues that they want to help address. They can't just pick their project and say, this is what I want to do. They have to say, this is what I want to do because this is what my community wants. And so right from early on, these are 8th graders, they are already engaging in how do I support my community? How do I lead and serve in my community? And that's one way of just thinking about it, just giving students opportunities to address the challenges that they face and take ownership for what they can. And they're learning things about, you know, not only collaboration, but building alliances as 14-year-olds. And I think that's just one way. But I would strongly encourage us not to encourage students to leave, and students will make those decisions. But they, you know, the thing about middle and high school students, even elementary, like, they have a keen sense of justice and they want to do right. They're concerned about equity. And, you know, if students are, you know, we have to be careful about telling students to leave when what we're saying also is leave the people that you love and the people who care for you. That's another level of oppressive messaging that we really need to stay away from.
Wow. And with that, we're going to have to close out. But thank you so much for your insights. That's great.